Hey, it's Jared. In this video, we're going to take a look at XCloud, a hosting service and dashboard that is changing the game for me as a small agency that manages 12 of his own websites, but also has just over 60 websites that I manage for clients. Now, these are all WordPress websites, so I'm going to be talking about this from the perspective of a WordPress site manager, but with that said, you can use XCloud for a lot of different things. I'll make sure to link down below so you can check out XCloud. I think you're absolutely going to love it, and I'm going to tell you why in this video. We're going to walk through the entire dashboard and how the servers are set up, and also how a site is set up and managed as well. And you'll see just how useful this is, especially if you're coming from a host like I was, where you don't have access to a lot of this information. See, I was using a managed WordPress hosting platform, which did a decent job, didn't have too many issues with them, but their support wasn't that good, and I also didn't know much information about the performance of my websites. I didn't know how much they were taxing a server because the dashboard had absolutely no information at all. Now, I moved to a managed WordPress platform probably about 5 years ago because they got good enough that I didn't need to deal with managing dedicated servers anymore, which were definitely more of a hassle than I wanted to deal with. All of my websites being on a server or two meant 1 or 2 points of failure, and every now and then I would have a little bit of an issue that I'd have to deal with, and all of my client sites would be down at the same time, which was a big hassle. Introducing cloud type hosting, where everything is running on an individual instance and a lot less likely that you're going to have everything go down at once. But I didn't have the information that I needed to know whether or not I was running too close to the edge of running out of performance for the sites that I had. I just didn't have any of that information. And XCloud and their dashboard gives me all of that information, and also gives me the ability to spin up additional servers easily and move sites around should I need to. So let's take a look at the dashboard. On the dashboard here, you can see in this particular team, I have a couple of teams set up. I have my own sites under Jared's team, and then I have all of my client sites under HMG for Hill Media Group. Now, right here, I can see an overview of some of the sites that I have. So it says I've got a total of 12. I have 1 active server under this team, and I can see easily if any of my sites have vulnerabilities. That's a huge one. If there's a plugin on a site that for some reason is not getting updated automatically, or perhaps I haven't looked at that site in a while, and there's a vulnerability, I want to know that first and foremost right from this screen, especially as a WordPress developer and WordPress website manager. So if I go under servers, you can see I have 1 server with 12 sites enabled here. We'll look at the server level first, and then we'll look at how you can manage a site. It's very easy to add new servers. I could just spin up a new server. It probably takes about 5 minutes, and I've got a whole new server ready to go. But under this server, which is on, I believe, their Titanium plan, I have 12 sites, and I feel like I could probably get a few more sites on there easily. Now, most of these sites that I have on here, with the exception of my courses website, are more like brochure websites. They have minimal updates from time to time, not a ton of traffic, but my courses website does have a good amount of traffic and utilizes quite a bit of resources because it's a very plugin intense website. And so it's important for me to know, am I running out of performance with a site like that? Because students are on there trying to watch videos, whether they're learning photography, how to use WordPress, or productivity. They don't want lags in their experience. They want it to be fast, and I want it to be fast also. So looking at my entire list of sites here, I can see whether or not any of these sites have plugin updates. I can see if the backups are active, see what server it's on, whether cache is enabled. I get the little green shield here showing me that there are no vulnerabilities. And then I also have the one-click magic login option, which keeps me from having to enter passwords and 2-factor and all that stuff. It just logs me right in. Now, underneath the menu here, I also have some additional options like viewing the site logs, the site events. I could purge cache from here. I can clone the site, disable or delete the site. Being able to quick access purge cache without having to log into the site is an excellent option, and it's something that I use quite a bit whenever a client's having issues with their site. Under server management, I can upgrade my plan. You can see that I'm on the Titanium here with 16 gigs of RAM, 4 CPUs, 384 gigs of SSD, and a price of $100. You can easily upgrade to a higher plan for more resources, but it's not possible to downgrade. I would have to spin up a whole nother server and then move some sites over manually in order to do that, which is not a problem. It's not likely that I'm going to need to downsize. Then down below, a very important one, which I have not had access to in a very long time. There's been times when I've needed to restart PHP because I made a change to an individual site and the change wasn't taking. For example, increasing PHP memory or something like that, or maybe I fixed something and it just doesn't seem to be taking. I can restart PHP and that problem often rectifies itself. We can also restart Nginx here. It's very easy to reboot these, and I would often have to submit a ticket and wait hours, if not a full day, in order to get something simple like that done when I was on managed WordPress hosting before. I can also set up individual cron jobs, something else I couldn't do on the last platform I was on. I can manage PHP, node configuration, all sorts of good stuff. But what I absolutely love is the monitoring. I can come in here and easily see what's being used and how much of it, and whether or not I'm getting close to running out of performance on the server, and if so, what site is utilizing the most performance. I can see that my RAM is at 46%, CPU is at 16%, hard disk usage is at 27%, and that was checked 6 minutes ago. So every hour this updates, and if I want, I could just click check again, and it's going to pull in that information, and I can see how things are going. I can then come down here to the graph and see how it's been doing over time. You can see there are some peaks, and most of the time it's kind of right down the middle, but every now and then it peaks. And I could look at 7 days as well and see the performance over a longer period of time. You can see that these up and down spikes are pretty common and nothing to worry about. Then if I scroll down, I can see the individual stats for each site, how much CPU, RAM, disk is being used for each of those sites, so I can easily identify which one's using the most. You can see that my courses site is using the most CPU, probably the most RAM as well, and even the most disk space. Scrolling down further, I can see the top CPU usage processes, and most of it has to do with the user for my courses website. And then if I scroll down even further, I could see top RAM processes is MySQL with 1.2 gigs, and it's in red because that's actually quite a bit. One thing that I'm trying to figure out is how to minimize the database size for my courses site without having to remove functionality. A big challenge when managing WordPress sites. I then have firewall management as well, which is great. I can create custom firewall rules, and then I'll also get a list of banned IP addresses down here that I could then trash and unban if I want, but it's great to have firewall built in and be able to manage that myself. There's also vulnerability settings. I can set whether I want these individual sites to be checked for that, which a majority of the time I would want turned on, but there's also a really neat feature called Enable Auto Update. If a vulnerability is found, we will update it within 24 hours. So that means they'll pull in the plugin update and update it right away. Obviously, if it's a plugin that you have a license for and the license has expired, I don't think it's going to be able to do that. But if you have access, then you're going to get that update automatically, which I think is a neat feature, especially if you want to set it and forget it. We can also set our server to automatically update patches and then reboot automatically as well. Right now I have that set to manual because I get in here once a day and I would choose to reboot during an off-peak time for my clients. But what I could do is set a reboot time. I could set this to 2 in the morning when I know all of my clients' businesses are closed and probably people are not browsing their website. So it's really neat to be able to manage that right here. We have individual site backup, which I'll show you, but we also have whole server backup. So I can run a backup of this entire server, which is being done once a week right now. I can download this. I can also restore from a backup also. So if something goes totally awry, I could simply restore from a backup and it's going to restore all of those sites and everything that's on that server back to where it was. So it's nice to have an entire server backup on top of site backups also. So let's take a look at an individual site. This is my photography site, and I can manage the domain connections, which is running through Cloudflare. What's great is you put in your Cloudflare API into XCloud, and then when you make any domain changes, it actually routes those changes over to Cloudflare and makes the changes to the A record, or if you have any additional domains, maybe there's additional A records or C names that are associated there. And I've done this on every single site because I have over 60 sites of client sites that I manage, and they're all through Cloudflare, as well as 12 of mine. And I have had 0 issues with allowing the API connection to XCloud and it automatically updating the A record for me when I go to push a site live. So it's great having this because that means this is handling the management of that. And I don't have to go into Cloudflare myself, make a change to the A record, and then wait for things to propagate or whatever. This handles it all and handles it fast, much faster than if I do it manually. It also shows us some other settings over here, such as page cache, HTTPS, whether backups are on, whether there are any updates. You can see the events log here, which is showing me the recent events for this particular site. It shows me that I purged cache about 6 days ago, and then there are some other things that were automatically done here. From the top of this page, I can deploy a staging site. I've got the magic login button so that I can one-click log into a site, and then I have those additional options here like the purge cache that I use quite often. Now, under domain, here's where I would set my primary domain, and then I'll check the box, add DNS and SSL certificate on Cloudflare, which means it's going to make the change on Cloudflare in the A record to point to this domain. So it's going to change the IP address. And then it's also going to assign the certificate at Cloudflare, which is something that I do anyways, but it's managing all of that process for me so I don't have to do it myself. I can also add additional domains here. If you're not using Cloudflare, then you can use the free SSL certificate issued and managed by XCloud themselves. And I manage all of my redirection on the sites individually, but you can also manage redirection here, which is absolutely great. You can create redirects and manage them here if you don't want to mess around with plugins. Now, a killer feature is being able to access the WP config file and make edits to it right from here. This is great because I used to have to SSL in or use FTP software so that I could edit the file manually. Time consuming, annoying because I didn't do it very often, which means I needed to track down the password, get logged in, all of that stuff. Nothing ever worked right out of the gate. This means I can make the edits to it right from the dashboard here and not have to worry about logging in. Typically, I'm doing this when I want to enable debugging or something like that. I could also look at all of the individual plugins that are running on this site. I could see the version. I can activate or deactivate plugins from here as well without even having to log into the site. So if I'm having issues with a plugin or I want to remove some functionality without having to go into the website, I can just deactivate one of these right from here, not have to mess around with it. Same thing with themes, all managed right here from the back end. I also have access to the caching and how the caching is going to be managed. Fast CGI with Nginx is enabled and pre-installed on every single WordPress deployment that you enable. So when you create a new WordPress site, it's going to get that Nginx helper and also the object caching plugin. All you have to do is enable them and you have caching. I use WP Rocket on a lot of sites, and so I have WP Rocket enabled here and then also object caching enabled. And so that means that if I clear cache here from the dashboard, it's actually connecting to the site and clearing cache in WP Rocket. It's also integrated with Super Cache and W3 Total Cache. These are the most popular caching plugins that are available, and you can easily manage them and connect here. It also has support for Object Cache Pro and Cloudflare Edge Cache if you're utilizing those. There's a specific tab for vulnerability scan. Obviously, I don't have any issues here, but I would have plugin report and theme report if I was having issues. Another huge value add for XCloud is the ability to integrate your email partner. So first of all, you can get 100 free emails and utilize XCloud's managed email service. This is always a problem for me because typical WordPress would use PHP for sending email. It never really worked that well unless you had some sort of configuration on your server. I always ended up using a plugin to manage SMTP for sending email. You don't have to do that anymore with XCloud because you can either use their email service or you can integrate with a SendGrid API. Now, I use SendGrid on all of my sites. It's the API that I use and it sends email on behalf of the website. And email deliverability always works. I don't have any issues there. It's really easy to create authenticated senders. So that way, if I want to create a no reply email, or even if I want to utilize an actual email like an info at that somebody actually checks, I can set that up and it's a verified sender from the website, which means that those emails are going to get delivered. They're not going to end up in spam or perhaps not even delivered at all. It's all verified and authenticated email. And now I don't have to manage all of that in a plugin anymore. I could simply just use SendGrid. I could put in the from name and the from email address. And then because I've configured under integrations my SendGrid API, I can use one API for the entire server instead of feeling like I need to have an API for every single site. This is a time saver for me and a huge value add of XCloud is this email configuration option. We also have individual site backups here. And so I'm taking nightly backups of every single site. So you can see here, I've got both remote and local backups. You can see it's taking a local backup, and then the remote backup is actually saving those remote backups to a Google Drive account, and it's deleting those automatically after a certain amount of days. Some sites I'm just running one backup, which deletes every 24 hours when a new one's created. Other sites I'm running 5 backups, so one a day for 5 days, and then it deletes the oldest one when it creates a new one. So excellent option here, being able to have on-site backups on the server that uses the server resources, and then also to have an off-site backup to a remote location like a Google Drive, a Dropbox, or something like that. There's a variety of different off-site options for integration. I also get individual site monitoring. And so we can see this individual site, how much CPU is it using, how much RAM, how much disk, and then it gives me some basic information down here. Because the server dashboard that we looked at earlier is so good, I spend most of my time there. But with my courses site and one of my client sites, which is a WordPress multi-site deployment, both of those sites do utilize a bit more resources. And so as I was figuring things out, trying to identify what plan I need, how many other websites I can have on an individual server, I was visiting this page quite often, taking a look just to see how performance was. I can also view the logs on the server as well. We've got our WordPress debug log, Nginx log, Nginx access, and Nginx error log. So all sorts of logs that we can view right here. We also have the connection information for SSH or SFTP, our individual database, a file manager as well, and then site-specific Nginx and security tools, customization, basic authentication, IP management, and stuff like that. And then we have the site settings, which I also didn't have a lot of control over on my previous host. I could change my PHP version, but I couldn't change things like max input, max execution time, memory limits, how many PHP workers this site gets. As you have a busier site, a site that's utilizing more resources, you might need to increase the max amount of PHP workers. This one's huge for my courses site, which have multiple people watching course videos, moving between different modules and stuff like that. My client that has that WordPress multi-site where they have different locations and very busy Sundays because it's a church, and so there's a lot of people on the site doing a lot of different things, and they need to have more PHP workers so that the site doesn't time out. I can actually change that here on my own. Here's that ability to enable WordPress debugging, WP debug, without having to go into the WP config file manually. There's a rescue site option, which actually allows me to update directory permissions. I have had sites in the past where a plugin messed with permissions to a specific folder, and right here I can just hit run and it's going to go through and reset all permissions. I mean, back in the day, the only way I could do that well would be to just reinstall a clean version of WordPress over the top and have that rewrite all the permissions because things were just challenging. Now I can easily run this and fix all of these things. I also have the ability to disable a site, and then, of course, delete a site here if that's something that I wanted to do. But I have so much more control than I used to, and the right kind of control for managing WordPress websites. Now, I get the most control if I was on a dedicated server and I either had a great dashboard installed that allowed me to manage that server well, or if I wanted to pretend like it was 10 or 15 years ago and run everything manually through a terminal command. So now let's switch over to the other team. This is the one that has all of my client sites. If I click here, you can see I have 3 servers that are running and it's showing me the performance for each of those servers. The only one that I don't see here is CPU, which would be great to see also, but it's showing me storage and RAM. Usually if the RAM is pinned pretty good, probably the CPU is pinned as well. So I can go in and look at the individual resource usage for one of these servers. I have the green check mark showing that they're provisioned and connected. I have how many sites each of these have in this particular setup here. And so it's very easy for me to see how my servers are doing and those client sites. Now, what's great about XCloud's pricing and the way that things are set up is that I can have multiple servers with only a handful of sites on each server. That's something that I didn't realize at first, which is why one of my servers has 23 sites and the other ones that I'm showing you right now have 6 and 8. The pricing is set up in a way where I could have maybe 10 sites per server, and then I have everything siloed in one server. So for example, if I had an issue with one of those servers, it would only affect that subset of sites and it wouldn't affect all of the sites on other servers, which I think is absolutely great. Now, I don't anticipate having any issues, but I did have one issue when I went and upgraded one of my servers. It says, make sure you take a backup. You gave me some warnings. I went ahead and ran that anyways. And then the server actually became disconnected from the dashboard, which means that all of those sites were offline, which was a huge bummer. I was definitely freaked out because this was maybe a few days into my experience with XCloud. I got on the chat with them. They have a 24-hour web chat right in the bottom right-hand corner of the site, and I accessed that, and they had my sites back up really quickly and said that that was a very rare instance where a server would actually become disconnected from the dashboard, and I couldn't just simply restart it myself. Now, I also had gotten an email notification that that had happened, and there was no possible way that I was going to miss this, which is absolutely great. Now, another thing that I have done is connected the server notifications up to WhatsApp, and I have WhatsApp on my phone. So not only do I get email notifications when there is any issue with a server, but I'd also get a WhatsApp chat right to my phone. So I'd get notified immediately, and I would know that information, be able to react extremely fast. These were things I didn't have access to, and the only way I was able to tell if a site was up or down was using a ping service, which sometimes could be delayed up to 5 to 10 minutes. And I need my client sites to be up, and if there's an issue, I want to be notified immediately. So far, I'm really enjoying XCloud. I think it's a great platform. The dashboard is great, and I love being able to manage my servers in this way and have the control and the information that the dashboard provides me. Now, I'm going to come back and do a long-term review after I've been hosting with XCloud for a couple of months. I've only been with them now for about a week and a half total, and I still have a few lingering sites yet to migrate over to XCloud, but I hope you found this video useful. I definitely went through a lot of what XCloud has here because I wanted you to see what I kind of had to figure out on my own, but I wanted to show you how I'm using it to manage a handful of my own sites as well as a bunch of client sites. So make sure to click subscribe so you can be notified when I put out that update video, as well as other WordPress related videos that I'll be adding between now and then. A great way to experience the performance of some sites that I'm hosting would be to go check out hillmediagroup.com or go check out my courses website, courses.jaredhill.com. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them down in the comment section below, but that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back in another one soon. Take care.